Welcome to That's Joy, the podcast. I'm your host, Cece Calbanero, and I'll be sharing stories of miracles, God moments, and unpacking the truth behind what joy truly means. My friend, when God gives you a direct call on your life, be sure to answer it. Here's to answering my call together. Hello, and welcome back to That's Joy, the podcast. I want to say I'm your host, but today I'm actually not going to be the host. I know you're probably wondering, like, wait, Cece, what are you saying? Well, my friends, today we are starting a brand new series called... I need to put a little sound there. The Switch series. The Switch series is going to be a segment of monthly episodes where Jonathan, my lovely husband, takes the host seat and asks your girl questions. Now, since this is the first go, we are coming up with our own questions, and Jonathan's going to weigh in on this too. But after this, I want to hear directly from you, and Jonathan wants to know what questions you guys have to ask. That way he doesn't have to think of them either. So please, after this episode, run to my Instagram DMs and let me know what questions you have for this brand new series. But I'm excited. Jonathan, you know how we kick off every That's Joy. So welcome. I guess you should say welcome to me.
Hello. That's Joy, the podcast.
Yes.
I'm looking at Cece's camera, but I should be looking at mine.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Yeah. We're getting a new thing going.
We're getting a new thing going, and you know how
hope you enjoy.
We still need to kick off every episode with a
joyful noise.
Boom! It's like he does this or something.
Joyful noise. I've also been off my podcast game for what has it been like? Probably 4 months.
4 months.
4 or 5 months. So, excuse me if I need to warm up a bit.
So are you gonna ask me or should I ask you?
I think it should be you. What is your joyful noise for 2025?
Shoot, I don't know if we're announcing it quite yet. But let's go with something that they already know, or maybe they don't know yet. But we know that there's been tons of shifts in the landscape of social media. And as you know, if you're listening to this on Monday when this releases, what a whirlwind of a weekend we've had, thinking that TikTok was going to be gone forever. And then all of a sudden it's back. While that is not my joyful noise in this moment is just how grateful I am to have a new platform to get excited about. And so, one, I'm very excited about Instagram and always have been for years. But two, I started a YouTube channel, y'all. And if you have not, listened to it
Sound
yet.
like a monkey, but excited.
If you haven't listened to it yet, or watched it, you should. You should put it on your big screen. I have poured many hours into lots of edits for the 2 videos that I have out, and I'm just excited to really utilize this platform in a new creative way that I haven't yet expressed myself on social media. So I'm excited for YouTube, and that's my joyful noise, is the last episode. I want to say episode because we're doing a podcast. The last video.
Video number 2.
2.
And I will say they're great videos. Very well put together. So she's obviously has the skills to do it. So
it comes big coming from Jonathan, who consumes the highest quality of videos on every platform. So thanks.
And I do watch a lot of them. So
you do.
She crushed.
Thanks.
Just like this podcast is about to. Share with your friends.
Boom. Look at him hosting.
Promotion.
All right, host.
Are we ready?
Us. We're going.
So I'm hosting now at this point, and pretty much we're just going to dive into some questions.
Yeah.
Is what I get. So to prep you guys, I did not have a ton of prep on this. We kind of just hopped into it. So we got some questions, a few of them. Like she said, if you have more questions that you want her to answer, because this is going to be a regular thing on a monthly basis, correct?
Yeah.
Every single month. Send them in her Instagram, so that way we can actually have some questions from you guys, because that's how it's going to be more interactive, more fun, is to hear from you. So with that being said, let's get into the first question of the day. And I really like this one. This one will be interesting. Let Cece answer. And then I actually have one for myself that I want to answer from this one too. So the question is, if you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I saw this question and I was like, ooh, that runs so deep, especially if you listen to last week's episode. Last week's episode, I shared a bit on my parents' divorce. Actually, not a bit, like a large bit of my heart on that entire episode. And I really got to think about my 18-year-old self, because my parents got a divorce in 8th grade. But honestly, the heat of it all was throughout high school. And at 18, you find yourself graduating high school. And so if I could tell her, gosh, one thing, these types of questions make me so emotional, but I think I would tell her, like, trust the process, trust in God, trust that it will all be better than anything that you could ever think, ask, or imagine. And that's on scripture, and that's on trusting God with it all. I think there are so many things, like 18 to honestly like 24 throughout all of college, where I just found myself not trusting in a lot of ways, worrying more than I was praying, finding myself in a seat of anxiety rather than joy or peace. And if I could go back and just whisper in her ear, I think I would have told her in those tiny moments of like overwhelm. Are you going to pass this exam? Are you going to graduate from college? Are you going to finish in 4 years? Like all of those really heavy things that are so real. I think I would have like knelt down and said, hey girl, trust. Like, it's all going to be good. It's all going to be okay. So I think that's what I would say.
Wow, that was great. That also really aligned with what I was going to say, which was literally embrace failure and change. That was it.
That's great.
Because like when you're young, you think everything's just a big deal.
Right.
But when you get older, you realize, oh, that was just a stepping stone to the next thing. So it's exactly what you just said. Like, if you trust that it's going to be good, then it is. It's going to be good, right? So when you're 18, you're like, everything is such a big deal.
Oh, everything's so serious. Like that friend that unfollowed you, that you had 4 classes with every single day, and you guys got in a fight, is like the biggest deal. But little do you know, it's like doors opening and shutting so that the next thing could happen in your life. And so I love the embrace the change. It reminds me, quick tangent, and I feel like there's going to be lots of these, because between Jonathan and I, it feels like a car ride where this is where our brains go in a lot of ways. But your embrace the change idea reminded me of what we talked about when I asked you that one time not too long ago, what is that one thing that if you can instill in our kids, our future kids, like one lesson, like what would that lesson be? And I think we said something along the lines of like for them to embody the trait of change. But what was the word? Do you remember?
I don't. Probably like flexibility or something to that extent. Being able to manage like highs and lows. They're going to come.
It just came. Adaptability.
That's what it is. Yep,
Adaptability being the number one trait that I feel like is so important in life, because everything changes. So with that being said, I love that answer.
Yeah. I wonder too, just off the top of my head, do you think that going along with that, if you thought that way when you were 18, would that change your growth though? Do you think it would? Does that make sense? Do you think that if you were that clear on the perspective that you would be able to learn as quickly or as much as you did through because struggle helps you grow. Right. What do you think?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I think that it would have changed everything, because I think that everything in which it has taken place has already been written, right? And we talk about that so often, and you remind me of that so often, of how much it all is already written. And scripture points to that in Psalm 139, which I share so often too. All these days are already numbered. And so if that is true, then I have to believe that I learned this lesson right on time at 29. And I didn't need to know it at 18, because I wouldn't be who I am today. Whether she was further or more behind, it doesn't matter, because there's no changing that. And so I think that it's that surrender again of just like, with what I know today, how can I steward this knowledge to the best of my ability? And I think that's like just the best way you can look at it. Otherwise, you'll go down a rabbit hole of like, oh gosh, well, what if I did know it sooner? Maybe I would actually be that millionaire now, you know?
That's literally what I was thinking. Like, although it's great to learn things faster, because I will say I am somebody who did kind of experience that. I sought out things. YouTube, for example, taught me a lot. But like I learned things a little bit quicker than some people might. And that did fast track me in some ways.
Totally.
But I think a lot of people could beat themselves up and say, oh, I should have learned that faster. Or I should have done that, when it doesn't matter. It's over. You know it now.
Right.
All you have is the next thing.
No, it's so true.
That's why I asked that, because I think it's interesting. Like, there's the paradigm of, yeah, it could have helped you.
Right.
But it's past. So it's like, it is what it is.
Right. No, I love that you said that too, because a lot of people may not know this who listen, but Jonathan and I have an age gap. And I think that that's so strategic of the Lord in a lot of ways, because truthfully, where you will be at 30 is going to be, what I believe, astronomically different than where I will be at 30. I turned 30 in April of this year, and you will be 30 in 5 years. And so that's just a crazy thought. We're like 4 years and a couple months shy of each other. And so it's exactly your point. Like, what you were learning, absorbing, reading, like plugging into is so different at 21 versus what I was listening to at 21.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change that per se to like take your shoes, because it's not my road. That was your road,
exactly.
you know? And it has to be eyes fixed on you and Jesus and your road. So you're right where you need to be.
100%. That was good. Let's go to the next question here.
Yeah.
This is another good one. A lot of good questions here. So, what's a question you wish people asked you more often? Let me say that one more time. What's a question you wished asked? I can't talk. What's a question you wish people asked you more often?
That's good. Yeah, this is a good one. When I think about this question, I think about like every fast encounter. I think about the Starbucks line. I think about the, Costco bumping the carts, oops, sorry, encounter, like those really fast exchanges with people. But I also think about friendships and checking in on each other. And the question that comes to mind for me that I wish people would ask and at least hold more space for, not only for me, but for others too, right? Like, if this was just a question that we had up here rather than down here, it's simple. It's, how are you really? Like, how are you really doing right now? I think we don't do a good job as society, as people, but even as like close community members of each other, of just holding space for how you're really doing. And it's not to say that you have to necessarily like always be in a bad place that you need to be asked, how are you really? Like, you could literally ask that question and hold space for me celebrating the Hive launching my YouTube channels, but I didn't get to share with anyone how genuinely I'm excited for that new thing, right? Yeah. And then the next week it could be, actually, I just released a really hard episode on my parents' divorce that resurfaced some things that I wasn't necessarily like ready for it to come down on me in a way, And so I think if we just asked, and people just asked more often, like, how are you really? It would just create, I think, a little bit more love and space for people. That's something that came to mind. But I'm
that's
curious
a good question.
Now for yours.
I was listening to something probably a couple months ago, and a guy was talking about terrible questions to ask people when you are at like a, when you go to meet people? Like a community event, or if you're going to some business networking event. Yeah. Terrible question to ask people is, how are you? Because it's just like, nobody's going to give you a real honest answer to the question, how are you?
Right.
So obviously you could prompt that to be a little bit more like of an intimate question. But yeah, I think that's such a good thought of like, how are you actually? Because most people, nobody's going to say, I've kind of been struggling, like nobody's going to open up like that, especially if they don't know you closely. And even if they do know you closely, they may be a person who might just say, oh, I'm doing well. Like, God's got it. And God's got it. But you still could be struggling if God's got it. Like, that's the reality. So I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
But yeah, the question that I asked, or that I thought of people ask more often, really was more surrounding around like things that I'm excited about. So like, what are you excited about? That was kind of a similar thing to what the video I was listening to was saying, was like, ask people, what are they doing that they're excited about in work, but just in life? Like, what are you excited about?
Yeah.
Because that way you kind of open up for that person to be able to share something that's bringing them joy, bringing them excitement in life, which they may not be able to share to somebody who's not wanting to hear that.
Right.
So I think that's a really cool question to ask somebody.
That's one that I feel like if you are in high school or college listening to this right now, that can be such a powerful question that you put in your tool belt, because I took communication classes. I had it as a minor in college. And one of the things that they once shared was, instead of asking like, oh, hi, my name's Cece. Hi, my name's Jonathan. So what do you do for work? it's like a automatic association of like who you are is what you do for work. And instead of asking that very question that feels like so in the boxed up question, you could instead ask, what makes you excited this week? Or what are you most excited about this week? Because naturally, if work is something that they are passionate about, then that'll come up.
Yeah.
But if it's not who they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the US.
Right.
Our question is, what do you do?
Right. What do you do?
We all know what that means. It's like, what do you do for work? That's the question.
Right.
But that's kind of prompting just to talk about something somebody may not be excited about.
Right,
Like their work may not be the thing they're passionate about, which is okay.
Right.
Obviously, we want to get to a point where we're doing things we're passionate about, but you may just be working so that way you can do the thing you're passionate about.
Right.
So I like that question. I thought that was really good.
That's great.
So
boom.
any other thoughts on that, or we want to move to the next one?
I think hit it with the next one, host.
So as this is going to be perfect. As we are on That's Joy the podcast, this question, so fitting. I don't think you've probably had this specific version of this question come up.
Okay.
So I think this would be cool. If joy were a recipe, what ingredients does it have?
Ooh. This one makes my heart like flutter. I don't know how to fully describe it, but I just feel like I get like a little burst of butterflies in my stomach because I think it's something that I'm so passionate about. I think it's a complex recipe in a lot of ways. I guess I should take that back. It's not a complex recipe. Like, it's not hard to make, but I do believe it's made up of a lot of ingredients. And those ingredients are like all good things. So what comes first to mind is love. I think joy has a very large part of just inside of joy's recipe is a large part love, but I also think it's kindness, and I also think it's playfulness, and I think it's a smile, and I think it's a hug, and I think it's a burst of laughter. Like, I think it's a sum of all of these emotions that we've been gifted to feel, but in a lot of ways, I think that in the same breath, there's sadness in the recipe. I think that there's grief in the recipe, and I think that there's all the things that I've shared on this podcast that like make up joy. And so it's not complex to make because I don't think that God created it to be confusing to recreate for yourself, but I do believe that it wouldn't be something that's like, here's my 3 ingredient recipes to the best cookies. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily my perspective on joy. I think it's like a sum of all good things. And I say good things, and you might wonder, well, Cece, you shared sadness and grief. How could those be good? But the reality is that what I've come to find after losing all 4 grandparents is that grief is real, and it's such a hard thing, and it harbors a lot of sadness. But to know that level of grief and sadness is to know another level of joy. Because of that loss, and I think about this because Instagram popped up on my stories with like, post the very first photo that you have favored in your album, no cheating, right? I go back all the way and I'm like, oh dear God, what's my favorite picture going to be? And then I thought it was going to be like a college photo or something. But then it was me and my grandma in Hawaii. And I was like, oh man, I miss her so much. And that was in 2013, which feels like 5 seconds ago in a lot of ways, but it was over 10 years ago, which is crazy. And I think about that grief and it makes me smile because I'm able to know a love like that makes the pain still linger in a beautiful way. And I don't really know how to fully describe that. I think that a lot of people still grapple with how to even convey grief. I don't know if I'll ever be on the arrival side of understanding it all. But yeah, I think that's what my pot, if I'm thinking about soup and throwing all of the different things inside of it, it just embodies a little bit of everything in the best way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like most people that heard that question, they would be like, oh, what are all these positive things?
Yeah.
But in reality, you know, it's like the saying, you can't have happiness without sadness. You can't have success without failure. You can't have the contradicting things. The things that you can't know one thing without knowing the opposite of it.
Right.
So you have to know one to know the other. Joy's no different. In order to know it, you have to experience what it's like not to have it.
Yeah.
And that's why when you hear, you know, the joy of the Lord, that doesn't mean you're happy all the time.
Right.
It just, you know what it means when you experience it. You go from this state of, I don't I don't sit in a place of overwhelming joy, even in sorrows, even in pain, to I experience joy despite those things.
Right.
So that's the contradicting thing about it, is you have to have those negative things in order to have the positive. So that's a great outlook for it. Most people wouldn't think that way.
Yeah.
I also thought for that one, like the primary ingredient that came to mind for me was just perspective, was just being able to look back and see like, okay, if it is a bad thing, how do we shift the perspective on it? Because there's always, once again, that contradiction to that.
Totally.
Is you fail at something, that's setting you up for the next thing.
Right.
You lose your job, that's opening up for the next thing. You God's creating space for that next thing. So it's the perspective on it can bring you that joy.
Yeah, I think perspective might be like the meat inside of the soup mix, you know?
Yeah,
I love that you were sharing that you can't know one thing without the other, because it reminds me of two very physical examples that we can literally remind ourselves in this moment. Like, it's snowing outside in Nashville right now, and we wouldn't know how frigid and cold it really was unless we really knew how hot it can get. Like, we walk outside and we're like, oh gosh, it's really cold. But I think we understand that depth of coldness, I guess you can say, because we've experienced temperatures that were also 102, very hot. And we know those moments because of these moments. And another prime example is dark and light, right? We only know when it's really dark because we've seen how bright and light it could get. And so in that same way too, I think that it's so beautiful that when we think about joy, I think God wants us to think of those things that make us feel happy first.
Yeah.
But then I also think he wants us to look at those other things and realize that the light shines brighter in the dark. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great example. You know, like light is literally, or darkness is literally the absence of light, and light's going to shine brightest in the dark. So when you have that perspective, it amplifies the thing.
Exactly.
So when you've gone through a hard time, a really hard time, then that joy, that happiness is amplified on the other side of it. So that's a great outlook on the recipe of joy. So I got a question that she has no idea about, because some of these she got a chance to look over before. This one she doesn't know about at all, because I just came up with it. So with that thought in mind, what are 3 things that you would challenge listeners to do in 2025, or challenge listeners to work on, or challenge listeners to try to build as qualities? Think along those lines.
Yeah. You guys know I love a challenge. If you listen to That's Joy, then hopefully you've been encouraged in some way to grow. And when I mean grow, I mean get a little uncomfortable. So the 3 things that I would challenge my listeners to do this year, which this is such a good question, by the way, but the first would be to dive in to your relationship with God. I think that is first and foremost. There has to be that first year. And for me, it wasn't too long ago where I bought a Bible for the very first time, where I started to read devotionals in the morning over just waking up and hitting the snooze button. Like, you guys, I didn't go to high school and all of my collegiate years look like that. I actually didn't really begin learning this journey until, I want to say, like the year after I graduated from college. And so a lot of people, that might be surprising to you, but I share that to hopefully spark just a dose of encouragement no matter where you are. I know that I have gals listening who are 15. Love you guys so much that you're literally plugging into this type of content when you're 15 years old. I also have mamas on here and soon to be mamas who are closer to 40. And to you, I say that if this isn't something that you have fully committed to yet, you are right on time. Just like we shared at the beginning of the episode, like, it's not Cece's lane, it's your lane. So one, I would say, figure out what that relationship with God looks like for you and just commit to it. Make that your number one commitment this year. And when you shut your eyes and it's December 31st, 2025, you will have said, I grew stronger in my relationship with God because I did blank, right? So that's the first thing that I would encourage my listeners to do. The second thing that I would encourage my listeners to do are figure out what habits fill your cup. And I share a lot of this type of content on my Instagram and soon to be on my YouTube. It's my next YouTube channel, so buckle up for that one, but it's my morning routine. And I know that you hear this left and right, and you're like, oh gosh, is she the cold plunge girly who goes in the sauna and the cold plunge at 5 a.m. and wakes up before the sun and all these crazy things? And the reality is that does work and fill a lot of people's cup. It doesn't have to be yours. If you naturally have a shift where you work at a hospital and you get out at 10, do I want you to wake up at 5 when you're going to bed at 11:30? No, that's not for you, right? You've got to figure out what works for you. But here's the thing. I think that when you figure out these small habits that actually feel small, you're like, Cece, how's that going to change my life? I think it's going to change your life because James Clear said it best, but he said every decision you make is a vote for your future self. And so when you are choosing those habits in the morning as the things that you are saying yes to yourself, like you are promising yourself that you are going to move your body, drink water, read the word, like those 3 things could be, by the way, all you do every single morning, and that would be good for you. Like if that works, run with it. But every single thing is a vote for who you say you want to be. And so for me, I know that I'm going to be on a forever journey of growth. So there is no arrival. And these are the things that make me feel my best, that fill my cup. And by the way, that are promises that I make to myself to prove to myself that I am someone of my word, who commits to my word, where my yes means yes and my no means no. And does that mean I'm perfect at it? No. Here's my witness, right? Jonathan knows that it's not every 365 this happens, but majority of the time, this is our routine. This is the life that we've built. And so I am proud of that. And I'm also excited about that gap of growth of where we will continue to get better in so many areas. So first one, relationship with God. Second one, figure out those habits. And the third is follow that freaking nudge. I share this all the time, but if you haven't watched the very first YouTube video that I made, then I would encourage you to watch it, because there have been so many different versions of what I call this nudge that has taken place in my life. And when I say nudge, I mean that stirring in your heart. I mean when your heart does that double thump and you're like, oh gosh, like I feel like I'm supposed to do something right now. Like I don't know if you've felt that at a coffee shop when you felt like you were supposed to give the compliment to someone, but then you didn't. You kind of leaned back. Or that time where you felt like you really wanted to go say hi to that guy, but then you did it. You just fell back. Like whatever that might look like for you, I know that you've had those nudges and you've ignored them. Because friend, welcome, you're human. Like I've done it too, a lot. But I've also had those nudges in a smaller amount where I've had those nudges and I did something right with them. And I'm so grateful, because one of those nudges looked like starting this podcast. I didn't have all the answers in 2022 in January when I had the idea pop into my head, but I set a date and I told a friend and I said, by March 7th, I'm launching this thing. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm going to launch it. And I did. And so it's following that nudge, even if you don't have all the answers yet. That was a long-winded answer, but I think that it's one that would actually like help people be different come New Year's Eve 2026.
That's good. I had a question to go along with your first point about growing with God. What did you do? Like, what were the things that you committed to grow? Because obviously there's a million options. And I was thinking about that for your second point as well.
Yeah.
As an ex-fitness coach, somebody who helped people change habits from a health perspective.
Yeah.
You should work through, what can I commit to on my worst day? Not my best day. Not
That's
when I'm
great.
motivated. Not when I'm excited. Not after I get done listening to CC's podcast and I want to crush all my goals. What are you going to do on your worst day?
Yeah.
Right? So that's something to think about. So with that thought in mind, from a perspective of growing with God, what did you do to help you do that? And also maybe even answer that for your second question of habits. Like what got you started? Yeah,
that's really great. So the first question of how did I begin to grow my relationship with God? I think it looked like things as simple as like showing up to church every Sunday. Like literally the pastor shared today, get here, show up. Y'all say you want a blessing, but you're not even in the house and you're not showing up every single Sunday. And it's not to say that 52 Sundays equals blessings. No, 52 Sundays means a relationship stronger with God, which means no matter what the blessing looks like, you're good. And so I think that's what my response would be, is like, show up. Because one, you're going to meet new people there. You're going to worship there. You're going to hear something that you have not heard yet that is going to spark something up here to hopefully create transformation here. And so that's what I would say first. The second is an easy swap. Like, I listened to not great music in college and with sorority sisters, and even on my basketball team in high school, like, we just listened to not great music. And so I remember that I made a little promise to myself come post grad, where on my commute to work and whatnot, I would swap it for worship music. And again, it wasn't every single day, 52 weeks a year. Like, it wasn't that. It was like, how do I just like swap a little bit at a time? And where I feel these tiny convictions, honestly, like, swap again and add more Jesus and less world. And like, it just became a point where I kept exchanging what I had held on to in the world for more of what I believe Jesus wanted for me. And then it looked like picking up a devotional, and it looked like buying the Bible. And then it looked like, all right, let me just like start reading and start journaling like a couple times a week in the morning. And then that developed. And so read the book Atomic Habits, because I really think that that's how you habit stack, to answer that second question. I really think that that's the guide to help give you like the tangible of like, but how do I actually do it, you know?
Yeah, that's good. I always think about that though, with things you're trying to change. It's literally what's the bare minimum that I know I can commit to.
Right. Yeah.
Is always going to be.
I mean, you grew up like obviously in the Word and from a family who is literally like engulfed in the Word of God. Not that mine wasn't, but it was just a lot different, right? Because I grew up Catholic. And so what would you say for you growing, like shifting from this is what my family and parents believe till this is what I believe?
Yeah, I don't think it's really any different in the sense that you still have to believe it for yourself. So you still have to go through the same experience of, okay, I say I believe this thing, but do I really believe it?
Yeah.
And are my actions showing that? Right. So, I mean, the pastor at church today literally had a whole sermon about this, but your intention is showing everything that we need to know. Are you actually doing the things you say you're going to do? What you say you believe in? Are you actually... your actions showing that? Is your intention showing that? So even for me, it was the same thing. It was, okay, can I read my Bible most days out of the week? You don't have to say every day, because maybe you know you're going to fall short. So it doesn't have to be every day. But
don't start there.
Can I say I'm going to at least pick it up during the week one time?
Right.
Can I get to church 3 weeks out of the month?
Right.
Like, give yourself some numbers to go, like some way to track it, I think is always obviously helpful. But yeah, that bare minimum, what can I do? Right. And I think obviously like changing the things you're consuming, whether that's music, TV shows, YouTube videos, whatever it is that you are consuming, that's going to shift the way that you think, and then ultimately the actions that you take. So I think it's the same for somebody who grew up in the church versus somebody who didn't. Yeah. You still have to overcome the worldly desires that we're inborn with. Like it's the same thing. So yeah, I would say those are great points. Like, start with those things. Yeah. But yeah, showing up to church. That's not to say you have to go to church to be a Christian, but as we know, going to church is a way for you to grow in community, also a way for you to have consistency and show up even when you don't feel like it, which can be great. Because what does our pastor say about worship? I can't even remember.
Church is over, service is on.
No, like you worship even despite the way that you're feeling, and worship shifts the atmosphere. Pretty much is the extent of it, right? So you know, like if you're having a hard time, you don't want to go to church, you'll probably feel better after you go.
It's even if you didn't want to go. Literally like a workout.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wants to go to the workout. Let's be real. You don't even like going to the workout, and you were a personal trainer for how long? So it's that same exact thing. It's not like maybe what we want to do, but my gosh, is it what we need?
Yeah, that's good. So I think that's all the questions we got.
All right.
So you guys have to let us know, first thing, questions that you want answered, but also what type of topics do you like listening to the most? Because I think that's always helpful for podcasters, speakers. What do people like to hear from CC? Like, what kind of stuff? Is it more scripture type stuff? Is it more motivation? Is it more habits? Is it all of it?
Yeah.
Share that too.
Feedback is always welcomed as well. So like I said at the top, my DMs are so open. If this episode we were like, wow, I love that you guys went all over the place because it just was entertaining and kept me on my feet. Love it. Send it. Let me know. Also, if you're like, whoa, sis, we need a theme. I feel like my heart went up and down so many times. Send it. Let me know. I would love to hear any and all of your feedback. It means the world. And by the way, shout out to 3 of my girlies who left a recent review on Apple. That means the world. There are only, I will say only, but about 300 reviews. I say this, y'all, because the truth of the matter is with podcasts, the number one way to grow is rates and reviews. So it's from you guys. It's hitting that 5 stars on Spotify and then dropping a little comment on Apple for a review, and that does wonders. And so thank you for the 3 people who already took the time in January to run over to Apple and just write how That's Joy is impacting you. It means the world. And I guess
YouTube video in the description.
Yep.
Go watch new YouTube video dropping in a couple days. What else?
I guess Jonathan doesn't know the complete outro yet. So is this
I know the
baton?
outro.
All right.
I know the outro.
Take us.
Jesus loves you. I love you. Something to that extent. We'll let Cece take over from here.
Okay, pass the baton back. Thanks, host. I feel like that was like a weather pass-off moment. All right, you guys, I am so grateful that you listened all the way through. Like I said, if there's a certain part of this episode that you love the most, maybe just a part of a topic that you want us to go in on this next Switch series, then let me know what that is too. Shoot me a DM at CCALBONERO on Instagram, TikTok-ish, but also YouTube. Oh wait, let the people know where they could find you, because hello, Jonathan is also a content creator and a business owner and a man of many talents. So come back in real quick, let them know where they could find you.
Instagram, Lutz Jonathan _ marketing, social media, content.
Boom.
There we go.
So if your dream is to grow in any aspect on social media in 2025, hello, if that's your nudge, you better follow him, because he drops a ton of tangible tips that you can actually run with and apply to your accounts like ASAP. So follow him. And if you're not following That's Joy, the podcast, you can do that on Instagram as well. And my weekly newsletter. So I am going to get better at this in 2025. So if you have not yet subscribed to the Joy Corner, you can do that by going to the show notes or run to that'sjoypodcast.com and subscribe to my newsletter there. Friends, I'll never leave an episode of That's Joy, even if Jonathan is the host, without saying, if you have even the smallest desire to meet the creator of the universe, or if you've already been saved but you're not really free, I want to invite you to sit at the table of plenty with me and so many others. I'm telling you, there's abundance here. There is so much joy here. And my gosh, God is for you. All you have to do is invite him into your heart right now. He's waiting for you. He wants to meet with you. And friend, I am so proud of you. If you just made this decision, I'd love to know you. Shoot me a text to that number in the show notes. I could pray for you. I love you. God loves you. And until next time, I'll talk to y'all next time. Thank you so, so much for being here.